Hi everyone. Uh, Today's video takes us through Orleana's chapter at the beginning of book 3, The Judges, and goes through a very, very short Leah chapter through page 208. So the first page of Orleana's chapter is actually 191. Um, if you've done the reading, you know what this picture is. I will come back to this picture. This chapter of Orleana's gives some very, very much needed and long awaited background information. If you hear my husband talking in the background, don't. It's probably completely confidential legal matters, so make sure you pay attention. Um, she's talking about how she met Nathan, how she married Nathan during the Depression, and how World War II started, um, and how he was drafted. He thought he was going to be a chaplain in the war, but that didn't end up happening. And she was this young military wife. And when he was shipped out, she went back to Mississippi. And then the story of what actually happened to Nathan, which was that he was stationed um, in the Philippines and they got bombed. This is on page 196. Right here. Nathan was struck in the head with a shell fragment. He ran for cover, dazed, and spent the night in a bamboo pig shed. He suffered a concussion but gradually regained consciousness through the dawn and staggered out half-blinded into the open with no more a sense of direction than an insect rushing up a flame. By pure luck, just before nightfall, he was spotted on the beach and picked up by a PT boat. And then he found out later in the hospital that every single member um, of his company um, famously were forced on what is known as the Bataan Death March, and every single one of them died. Oh, it just shrank. Who says I don't give exciting visual interest in these amazing videos? Anyway, that's what I could find on Google for Bataan Death March or Bataan. I'm not sure. Um, and it's the survivor's guilt that he's the only one who survived that turned him into this person. And Orleana goes on to discuss, being a young married woman and having a baby and having twins a year later, um, which of course is no one's fault. Um, and then brings it back to the Congo at the end of her chapter. In the end, my lot was cast with the Congo. Poor Congo, barefoot bride of men who took her jewels and promised the kingdom. This is a metaphor for the natural resources in the Congo and the exploitation that was met with the country, the way that in a way that Orleana relates to. And then there's a brief Leah chapter talking about going back to Kilanga after going to Leopoldville for the inauguration of Patrice Lumumba, and how very different it is. It's not just different because there's not a party, or there's not a welcome feast. They are no longer getting paid. Since they're officially staying when they have been told to go home, their year is up, and they're the Congo is not a colony of Belgium anymore. It's its own country. So there's no Belgian support to pay missionaries. They are just there and they get $0 a month, um, which not just puts them as an equal to the families in the village, but beneath them, because the families in the village are at least subsistence farming, fishing, um, doing something not only to get food for their own family, but to contribute to the community, make a profit, contribute to the trade in the community. The prices aren't doing any of that. They're trying to survive on what they have. And Nathan is almost, I think this is one of the hardest aspects of the novel for me to believe, that Nathan does not contribute. He did try to do a garden, it failed, but he hasn't tried to take up any other kind of method to provide any kind of food for his family. He's not hunting, that at least not in a way that's mentioned. He's not trying to grow anything after the last um, fiasco with the garden in book one. It is um, it's pretty much down to the daughters at this point. Both Mother and Ruth May are extremely ill with malaria, and the other thing that happens in Leah's chapter at the end on 207 and 208 is her conversation with Nelson, where Nelson says that maybe someone put a curse on them. And Leah says, "Oh, we don't believe in a God that would put a curse on you." To which Nelson says, "What about Tata Chobe?" Which is, of course, the book of Job. I have made many mistakes over the years, assuming that you guys know Bible stories. Um, and maybe you do. Maybe you know the story of Job. Maybe it's one of those things where I can call on who's familiar with the story of Job, and one or two people raise their hands and can tell me. Um, but I know that I need to explain it for at least for some of you, if not all, if not many of you. Um, Probably not all of you, but anyway, it's an Old Testament story about a man named Job who was so faithful to God that, I don't know, was he challenged by the devil? Anyway, God decides to test Job's faith by taking everything, by making his life a living hell and killing his family and ruining his crops. And this is just off the top of my head. I'm probably getting things wrong, but um, basically making Job's life as miserable as possible to see if he will still believe in God even after everything horrible happens to him. Um, so it's a good example for the necessity of faith in tough times. Um, Maybe that's something that can be useful to you now. Um, but it's an interesting example used here because you've got this character, this African character saying, "What, you don't have curses? Your God doesn't curse you? What about this example?" And then to have Leah say, "Oh, Job, excuse me, why, that wasn't a curse, Nelson. God was testing his faith." Abu, Nelson said, meaning more or less, okay, fine. Um, and then um, kind of like it's all one or the other. It's all the same. It's six of one, half a dozen of another. Um, so there might be a question about that later on, like the following week. That's okay, I'll get back on track. Um, because Nelson's just like, yeah, whatever, it's kind of, isn't it kind of the same thing? Leah doesn't see it that way. I don't know if you can see Nelson's point or not. I hope you can. Um, and the very last thing on 208 is that Nelson, we find out what Rachel is called. She's the termite. The next one he will be testing is the termite. Mvula, a pale white termite that comes out after a rain, is what people here call Rachel because she's so pallid. Pallid meaning pale. Remember, Rachel is very, very, very fair. She's like me, except she also has white blonde hair. Mine is just gray. Um, their opinion is that she gets that way from staying indoors too much and being terrified of life in general. Rachel doesn't think much of termites, needless to say, and insists that the word has some other higher meaning, which is really, really funny. Um, and then eventually, um, Leah says to Nelson, we don't worship those gods, and she says bakave, meaning we don't pay for that. To which Nelson says, Liba, the gods you do not pay are the ones that can curse you best. Which also kind of shows that pragmatic approach to religion, where it's like you sort of there's that inclination among the villagers of Kilonga to worship whatever god is available to them in hopes of getting good things, practical good things coming to them in their lives. Anyway, I'm going to end it here. Hope everyone's doing great. Please talk to me in the comments. Um, if you would like. Um, that's it. Bye.